Welcome back to our channel, where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales, and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. Palace in chaos as Andrew's arrest to cover up horror for King Charles. William takes throne. There is no longer any truth to the myth that the arrest of Prince Andrew, Duke of York, occurred. The actual issue has now engulfed the throne itself, as the same payment that was purportedly engineered by a future king in order to bury a horrific scandal now threatens to bring him down. Within and outside the gates of the palace, many people feel that the last, irrevocable countdown to King Charles III's resignation has begun. This is the tale of how King Charles III's frantic attempt to safeguard the monarchy may have brought about his own demise. Andrew's arrest sparks an abdication crisis, paving the way for William's reign. This is the king's Watergate. During the early morning hours, the attack was not only rapid but also seismic. As the mist clung to the fields of the Sandringham estate, police vehicles advanced with silent purpose towards Wood Farm, the humble cottage where Prince Andrew, on his 66th birthday, felt he was protected from the storm that had characterized his public life. Wood Farm was located in the middle of the Sandringham estate. On the other hand, there was no safe haven on the scene. As a result of claims of misbehavior in a public position, officers from the Thames Valley Police Department arrested the king's brother, who was formerly the second in line to the throne. The news exploded all across the globe, and it was a time of deep embarrassment for the House of Windsor. On the other hand, as the day progressed, it became chillingly obvious that the disgraced Duke was simply the precursor to the main event. As a result of this controversy that had been brewing for a long time, the sovereign himself became the genuine target and the final consequence. The King of England addressed the country with a message that was of historic significance. He made the proclamation, "The law must take its course," after a phalanx of attorneys and advisors had carefully selected the words he would use. During his conversation with the authorities, he expressed his complete and unwavering support and cooperation. However, the unexpected conversion of Martin Luther King Jr. to the cause of open justice sounded hollow for a public that was becoming more and more cynical each day. Over the course of many decades, the organization that he now serves as the head of reportedly carried out a concerted effort to cover, protect, and financially support his brother. This campaign culminated in a payment of several $million to a woman who had accused Prince of sexual assault. It had been years since the arrest had finally brought an end to the boil that had been poisoning the kingdom. In doing so, however, it has brought to light a more profound illness, one that pertains directly to the king, and it raises a question that once brought down an American president. What did he know, and when did he know it? There is a ghost of Watergate that haunts Buckingham Palace. For constitutional experts and political historians who are seeing the unfolding of this crisis, the comparisons are not just inevitable, but also alarming. The specter of Richard Nixon and the Watergate crisis, which was a defining political catastrophe of the 20th century, is now skulking about the hallways of Buckingham Palace. For individuals who are only familiar with the Watergate scandal via movies and books about history, the scandal did not start with a scandalous crime, a third-rate burglary, which was a sloppy break-in at the headquarters of the Democratic National Committee, was the first step in this process. Even while the crime itself was relatively small, the subsequent cover-up, which was coordinated from the Oval Office, turned into a constitutional crisis that destroyed the trust of the American people in its leadership and ultimately resulted in the resignation of a president who was in a state of humiliation. The classic political aphorism said that the cover-up is always worse than the crime, and it was born out of this event. This is the existential danger that King Charles is now faced with. Andrew is the one who is responsible for the initial crimes, which include his unfortunate association with the convicted sexual offender Jeffrey Epstein, the embarrassing claims that Virginia Giuffre made, and his awful appearance on BBC Newsnight, which was filled with lies. On the other hand, The issue that the Crown is now facing is no longer about Andrew's alleged crimes. The matter at hand pertains to the purported use and misuse of executive authority, royal influence, and massive financial resources in order to hide the truth and generate quiet. It is about the efforts that Charles, who was the Prince of Wales at the time and the heir to the throne, took to control and diffuse a controversy that threatened to derail not just his mother's historic Jubilee, but also his own climb to the throne and the crowning of his life's great love, Queen Camilla. Insiders and pundits inside the royal family are in complete agreement that the subject of whether or not Andrew is guilty in a court of law is no longer relevant. Whether or not Charles had a part in the settlement of £12 million that was paid to Virginia Giuffre is the issue that will define the course of Charles's reign in the future. Would he give his approval? Did he make it possible for that to happen? The most incriminating question is whether or not he personally funded it. In the event that it is shown that the king paid hush money to the person who accused his brother, using either his own money or money that was directly under his control, his position will eventually become nearly legally unsustainable. He would go from being a king who was presiding over a family issue to becoming an active participant in a cover-up if he were to make such a devastating mistake in judgment. The analogy to Nixon, who obstructed the administration of justice by using the authority that came with his job, will be unavoidable. Furthermore, in the same way that the scandal of Watergate was resolved by a helicopter removing a humiliated president off the grounds of the White House, this issue may very well be resolved by an early and forced handover of power to the subsequent generation. That question of $40 million or more. On the front page of the Sun Daily, which is a publication whose editor, Victoria Newton, is believed to have impeccable sources inside the palace and a strong connection with King Charles himself, there is a story that is considered to be the most important piece of evidence in this growing dilemma for the king. Charles had personally donated an astounding £1.5 million of his own money towards the settlement with Virginia Giuffre, according to the newspaper, which published this information with unflinching confidence. This was not a briefing from an anonymous source. Rather, it was a claim that was explicit, thorough, and reputationally staked, and it came from a media company that was firmly rooted inside the royal ecosystem. Newton would never have published such a piece unless she was 100% confident of its authenticity, according to a senior editor at the newspaper, who corroborated such a conviction. A striking example of the palace's vulnerability was the reaction it gave. There were no vehement denials, no threats of legal action, and no objections to the regulatory body that oversees the press. As an alternative, a sympathetic journalist at the Times was provided with a briefing that was soft and unattributed. This was an attempt to muddy the waters with a half-hearted effort. In the absence of a robust rejoinder, this omission speaks loudly. In the high-pressure realm of royal public relations, a claim of this scale, if it turned out to be untrue, would be confronted with an enormous amount of force from the court system and the media. It was a deafening quiet, and many people would have interpreted it as an admission. It is a secondary detail to determine if the money originated directly from Charles's own Coutts bank account or whether it was channeled via a more opaque financial vehicle, such as an inheritance from his late father, Prince Philip. One of the most important allegations, which the palace has not been able to fight in a serious way, is that Charles was in charge of the payment. He was the de facto head of the family, the CEO of the firm, making the critical decisions, while his mother, the late Queen Elizabeth II, was in the twilight of her life, her health and faculties visibly failing. There were individuals who were able to spend time with the Queen in the months running up to her Platinum Jubilee. These individuals characterized the Queen as being fragile, often confused, and frequently confined to her bed. As far as palace insiders are concerned, the notion that she, in her reduced condition, was the sole architect of a complicated, legally difficult, multi-million-dollar international settlement is, to put it simply, absurd. One man, the Prince of Wales, was in charge of everything, including the duty, the authority, and the capacity to make decisions. Consequently, this payment was not only a concern pertaining to the family. In this case, the heir to the throne was the one who carried out the action. To avoid a public court case in which a senior royal would have to testify under oath about his involvement with a sex trafficking ring, it was a deliberate choice to utilize enormous riches to prevent the case from occurring. The sum of £1.5 million is the most convincing evidence. In other words, it is the concrete connection that ties Charles directly to the act of purchasing quiet, which is an act that now threatens to undermine his whole reign before it has ever started. There is a Jubilee, a queen consort, and a silence that is convenient. It is necessary to have an understanding of the two enormous events that were on the horizon in order to comprehend the great strain that Prince Charles was under at the beginning of the year 2022. These events were the culmination of his whole life's work and personal passions. A once-in-a-millennium commemoration of his mother's reign, the Platinum Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II was the first event. In order for the monarchy to be perfect, it was necessary to have a faultless celebration. Second, and maybe more personally significant, was guaranteeing that his wife, Camilla, would be proclaimed queen with him. This was the last component of his own legacy, and it was also the most important. The third person in his marriage to Princess Diana, Camilla had been a contentious figure for many years, causing a great deal of contention. In an effort to control her public image, the palace had gone to unusual measures, including the creation of the artificial and legally dubious title of Princess Consort, in order to appease a populace that was not yet prepared to accept her as queen. According to all accounts, Charles harbored a strong resentment on account of this compromise. It was not enough for him to just become king, he also wanted to have Queen Camilla at his side, which would serve as a conclusive and public validation of their love story. It was in February of 2022 that Queen Elizabeth made a momentous statement, which coincided with the finalization of the Jubilee settlement. When Charles became king, she expressed her sincere request that Camilla be recognized as queen consort. She claimed that this was her sincere want. This was the most prestigious award, a blessing from the king or queen that made it possible for Camilla to be crowned and placed under the anointing. Charles had a moment of deep personal success at that same time. At this exact and sensitive point, the last thing he could afford was for his brother to be led through a sleazy civil trial in New York, with daily headlines of sex, abuse, and his links to Jeffrey Epstein dominating the global news cycle. He could not afford for his brother to be put through this. If such a spectacle had taken place, it would have entirely overshadowed the Jubilee and may have poisoned the public mood, which could have put the acceptability of Queen Camilla, which was so difficult to achieve, in jeopardy. It is difficult to pay attention to the time. By making the gift to Virginia Giuffre, it was not just about safeguarding Andrew, it was also about defending the institution, and most importantly, it was about protecting Charles's well-crafted plans for the future of the monarchy under his leadership. It was impossible to imagine any other course of action, so he took charge of the payment. In order to preserve the heritage of his mother and to ensure that his bride would inherit the throne, he purchased his brother's quiet. It was a calculated risk, a choice that was taken under enormous pressure, and it was a pragmatic decision. However, in his haste to exert control over the story and protect the crown from the most significant danger it faces, he may have, by accident, been responsible for the creation of a far more significant danger for himself. The act of burying one scandal has resulted in the exhumation of another scandal, which placed his own integrity and competence to lead at the very core of the controversy. Parachute for abdication of duty. In the hard and old framework of the British monarchy, there is a mechanism for just such a crisis. This device is a constitutional emergency brake that may be pulled in the event that the personal behavior of the sovereign threatens the life of the institution itself. It is a kind of abdication. Despite the fact that it has only been employed once in the contemporary history of the United Kingdom under duress, it continues to be the most extreme approach possible. Essentially, it is the emergency parachute for the monarchy. The abdication of King Edward VIII in 1936 is, without a doubt, the most well-known example of this phenomenon. The king's reluctance to end his connection with Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee, led to a constitutional crisis that put the monarch against the government and the Church of England. In the end, he made the decision to abdicate in favor of his younger brother, who would later become King George VI. Although the crisis in question was more about marital decorum than it was about suspected complicity in a criminal cover-up, it did establish the notion that the crown is larger than any man who wears it. Even if the king is forced to abdicate, the institution must continue to exist. Spain is a more current and pertinent example because of its location. In 2014, King Juan Carlos I, who was once a beloved figure for his role in Spain's transition to democracy, got engaged in a series of severe financial and personal scandals. These scandals included allegations of financial misconduct and sexual misconduct. He took the deliberate choice to abdicate in favor of his son Felipe, as his popularity continued to drop and the reputation of the monarchy was being dragged through the gutter. The move was a brilliant example of the institution doing everything it could to protect itself. As soon as it occurred, it cauterized the wound, which made it possible for the Spanish monarchy to begin again under a new king who was clean and immaculate. The story was starting over. The individual, not the organization, was the source of the issue. The monarch has passed away, may he rest in peace. This is the paradigm that royal strategists are certainly considering right now in the chambers of Buckingham Palace, which are now characterized by a sense of terror. Abdication provides a clean break in the event that the information that links King Charles to the Andrew cover-up becomes indisputable, if the public turns against him, and if the political elite finds his position to be unsustainable. It would be portrayed not as a failure, but rather as an act of tremendous sacrifice and responsibility, a father standing aside for the sake of the crown and for the sake of his son. In a gloomy way, they are lucky that Charles's new cancer diagnosis supplies a convincing and face-saving tale. This circumstance is beneficial for them. It is possible that he may become a king emeritus, which would mean that he would step aside from operational management owing to his health. However, the actual cause for his decision is yet unknown. The change would take place quite quickly. King William V would be able to accede to the throne with clean hands, ready to begin the required task of reconstruction, since the scandal would be restricted to a single reign. In the presence of King William V, the moment of the modernizer. The Prince of Wales is under an increasing amount of pressure at this point. A guy who is more in sync with the 21st century than his father, Prince William has been cultivating an image as a contemporary and forward-thinking heir for a number of years. People have a perception of him as being more realistic, more in control, and, when it is required, more brutal. This situation, as terrible as it is for the family, offers him an opportunity that has never taken place before. There is an ancient saying in crisis management that says you should never throw away a good situation. The time has come for William to grab power and initiate the radical modernization project, which many people feel is necessary for the monarchy's continued existence in the long run. There has been an increase in the number of requests for a rapid and complete cleanup of the institution. In order to do this, it would be necessary to remove the titles of HRH from Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, who are the children of Prince Andrew. In light of the fact that their father is now facing such a scandal, it is seen to be impossible for them to continue capitalizing on their royal position. In addition to this, it would signify a complete and irrevocable breaking of links with the part of the family that is located in California. It is proposed that Prince Harry and Meghan Markle would be deprived of their titles as Duke and Duchess of Sussex, and that their children, Archie and Lilibet, would be removed from the line of succession. The argument is straightforward and powerful. They have disowned the family that is the source of their titles, and they do not even live in the nation. The continuation of their position in the line of succession is seen to be an absurdity that the monarchy can no longer afford to maintain. The establishment of a monarchy that is more corporate and less feudal, with a primary emphasis on the direct line of succession, would be the beginning of a really modified monarchy. William is said to have supported this idea for a considerable amount of time, and the current crisis provides him both the political capital and the public mandate to put it into action. In the event that he does not take action at this time, if he waits for the storm to pass, he will be seen as weak and indecisive, having been a member of the old guard that enabled this rot to flourish. This is his opportunity to demonstrate that he is the leader that the monarchy needs in order to manage its most difficult time. Taking charge of the narrative, stepping out of his father's shadow, and demonstrating that the House of Windsor is capable of self-policing and evolving in order to survive, are all aspects that he must do. There is a possibility that the choices he makes in the next days and weeks may have a significant impact on the future of the crown. The deep state and the failed investigations. A conspiracy of silence with regards to the deep state. The arrest of Prince Andrew by a regional police force, Thames Valley, has thrown a sharp focus on the recurrent and unexplained failings of the Metropolitan Police in London, which is a far more powerful force. This inertia has generated significant claims of a two-tier judicial system, with one system catering to the rich and well-connected, and another system catering to everyone else. For years, while credible charges grew, the Metropolitan Police Department failed to start a thorough investigation, indicating only that they were assessing information. Former Chief of Royal Protection Di Davies has been a vocal critic, suggesting a conspiracy that goes beyond the royal gates and into the British establishment. He claims that ministers, ambassadors, and senior civil servants must have known about Andrew's actions as UK trade envoy. He claims the evidence was accessible to anybody who sought it. The lack of an inquiry was intentional. Given this, a conspiracy of silence, a deep state pact to protect a senior royal, and the state's stability appear likely. Former Prime Minister Gordon Brown sent numerous police units a 5-page memorandum with new evidence, which increased the political weight of these concerns. The political elite's refusal to ignore the crisis proves this. The difference dam is breaking. The questions being explored are explosive. Which police official decided not to investigate Virginia Giuffre's initial allegations? Did royal protection officers who saw Andrew's conduct at Epstein's properties get a debriefing? Do their recordings remain public? Since these cops are expected to report any crime they encounter, they may be involved in a scheme to obstruct justice if they stay silent. In addition to the royal family, this issue affects the UK government, police, and political elite. No one knows how far the rot has gone, and Pandora's box is now an abyss. The accuser's last statement. The family of Virginia Giuffre's declaration reminded us of the human factor at the heart of this story, despite the constitutional mayhem and political machinations. By long last, it said, now our broken hearts have been relieved by the news that no one is above the law, not even royalty. He was never a royal, ended it, cutting through decades of pomp and grandeur. Not only did Jeffrey Epstein's survivors win, but so did abuse victims worldwide. As a long overdue reckoning for a person who had been sheltered by his birth institution for many years, it reframed the tale in a manner that was never previously feasible. The monarchy has long believed that masses, revolutions, and foreign forces were its main threats. However, history has proved that internal threats are real. The arrogant, abusive, and entitled who believe their pedigree exempts them from the law are culpable. Prince Andrew's imprisonment and King Charles's contemplation of a legacy on the brink of collapse make the British monarchy's future more uncertain than ever since 1936. One royal specialist noted that for now, the chips will fall where they may. The king's position will collapse if Andrew contests the claims and threatens to summon his brother as a witness. The royal family's last hope of survival is to convince Andrew to plead guilty, accept his punishment, and spend time in prison. If he refuses and brings the temple down, King Charles III's reign will end. Launching the parachute of abdication will transfer the crown to a new generation with some harm. A father will pay the ultimate price for his brother's sins. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.